Chapter 900. 2,800 years ago, Thoradin the Great unified the human race. The Arathar Empire rose from the earthy highlands, so the ancient earthy language was the predecessor of today's common human language. But with the passage of time, the ancient earthy language, which was difficult to pronounce and full of meaningless meaning, became a ceremonial language that was only used by the royal families and ceremonial officials during the most important sacrificial ceremonies. Except for the true aristocrats or ceremonial officials who had been passed down for nearly 3,000 years, no one would learn it. There were so many people present, and they were either elves who disdained learning the human race's special language, or a bunch of human powerhouses who were born ordinary people. It was reasonable to say that even Mograine, who was more like a warrior, could not understand all of it. There would not be a fourth person present who could understand it. But looking at Arthis, who was trembling all over, and Jaina, whose chest was heaving up and down, Duze was extremely annoyed. Ever since he crossed over to Azeroth, Duze's system elves would collect all the sounds around him, regardless of whether Duque noticed or not, and would automatically analyze and translate them. So when Duque said that Azeroth was the overlord of all languages, it was absolutely not an exaggeration. So Duque understood it. In layman's terms, the four sentences were, Arthis, why do you have to help Duque? Jaina, because your boss Archimonde killed my father, big brother and other relatives. I want revenge. I want to destroy the Burning Legion. At this point at least it was politically correct, wasn't it? But from the third sentence onwards the meaning changed. Arthis called for surrender. There is no hope for this world. The Burning Legion is destined to win. Why don't you come earlier? Even if you were once Duque's fiancé, I don't mind. I will make you my queen and rule the world of Azeroth forever. If there is a chance, I will help you overthrow the Burning Legion. Words should not be spoken carelessly. Since ancient times, many people had lost their heads because of the wrong words. If it were not for the Lich King Nazul's rebellion, Arthis, as Nazul's loyal dog, would not have dared to say such words. He thought that he had truly fallen and was ruthless, but his memories and once lost emotions still made him impulsive. As soon as he spoke the truth, he regretted it. If Jaina really gave in, he would feel that he had profited. Duke and Servanas, that adulterous couple, are showing off their love. It blinded your eyes. Miss G, he doesn't love you at all. Why do you have to suffer with him? Why don't you come here and be a queen? Who knew that Jaina's ultimate weapon would descend without warning at this moment? The original text could no longer be examined. Anyway, the sentence that Duque's system elf translated for Duque was very old-fashioned. I'd rather be the concubine of a hero than the wife of a monster. It was no wonder that the noble Prince Arthas Menethil, the self-proclaimed king of Lordaeron, had suffered 100 million damage to his soul. Throw them out of the atmosphere and straight into space. Are there any? Jaina actually declared, even if I become the queen of the 7 kingdoms of the humans. I'd rather be a nameless mistress for Duque than be the queen of Arthas. This was practically digging out his burning heart, throwing it on the ground and smashing it into pieces. Then, spitting on it, peeing on it, and soaking it in a cesspool for 49 days. Finally, pulling it out and parading it on the streets for the world to know. Saying it was an insult was overestimating the word, insult. Tie his body to the pillar of shame and whip it for 10,000 years was not enough to describe the humiliation he had suffered. Arthas broke down. On the other side, Duque bared his teeth and thought, damn, no wonder Jaina became the heroine of history. With this mockery, she is clearly the #1 main tank in the Alliance. What was tragic was that Duque had to pretend not to understand. He asked Jaina with concern, what did you say just now? Why did Arthas' expression change so much? Even though Jaina was thick-skinned, she still felt ashamed when she recalled what she had said in a fit of anger. Even the fair skin above her breastplate that was exposed to the air was flushed seductively. Oscar Award winner Best Actress Jaina puffed out her chest and sucked in her stomach as she spoke righteously. She looked as if her skin was flushed due to excessive excitement. This despicable and shameless demon who killed his father and teacher and slaughtered millions of lives of various races actually has the cheek to ask me to be his empress. I have mercilessly rejected him. Damn it. Truly merciless. The future Lich King, a super boss who was originally an incomparably famous villain in history, was completely trampled on by you. Alright. A certain Du was secretly delighted in his heart. This was not the social butterfly Jaina who had romantic entanglements with several powerhouses in the original history. In this life, Jaina had been sent to the Marcus residence when she was still a lowly. She had been a disciple and had been a widow for 10 years without marrying Duque. He had even cruelly broken off their engagement. She was still the original even now. If there was anyone who had wronged someone, it would definitely be Duque who had wronged Jaina. If this was some fantasy novel about breaking off an engagement, and Ji Outyen was the male lead, then Jaina would definitely be Ji Outyen. But this noble Jaina, who was now a queen, had actually said such words out of excitement. How could Duque not be pleased? Even if he didn't dare to show it on his face. It was so good that it felt like all the pores on his body had eaten a ginseng fruit. If he could like Jaina's post, Duke would definitely hire 10,000 people to give Jaina a trillion likes and send Jaina straight to the headlines. Compared to Jaina's move, Ji Outyen's following performance as a movie queen was nothing. Jaina pretended to be frightened and stood behind Duke. She hugged Duke's right arm with both hands and clamped his right arm with a pair of magic peaks exaggeratedly. She said, "Duke, I accidentally angered this demon. You must protect me." "All right, no problem. Leave it to me." Duque, who often looked like a hero but was actually a coward, really took care of everything this time. Ji Outyen had already said so much. If you don't protect her and let her be snatched away to be the wife of a ghost, are you still a male pig? This time, not only Duque stood in front of Jaina, the three holy knights also quickly adjusted their positions. Mograine and Turayan were like two door gods, standing in front of Duque, one on the left and one on the right, while Sidon stood behind Arthas. Duque hooked his right index finger at the two idiots in an extremely pretentious manner. "Come on. Let's hurt each other." Chapter 901. Mutual Damage. My *SS. Although the Alliance had gathered almost all of their strongest players to fight Arthas as if he was a boss, everyone knew that they were in trouble this time. Last time, the Alliance and Horde powerhouses besieged Arthas near the Dalajan, but they did not manage to take him down. The most important reason was that Frostmourne was too overpowered. Not only was it extremely sharp, but it also healed itself, weakened the enemy's will, released frost aura, and many other powerful effects. Ordinary epic weapons could not do anything to Arthas. If they were to fight head-on, the weapon would be broken in one hit. This was simply a collision between a bronze sword and a steel sword. There was no solution. Otherwise, why would they have to sacrifice Orgrim? At that time, of course, it was because the Dreadlord had saved him, but ultimately, it was because the Alliance and Horde were not strong enough. But today was different. Quell, Zarim and Ashbringer, the two artifacts, held the fort. Sidon focused on defense and Servanas madly dealt damage. Speaking of which, the surrounding powerhouses, including Duque, did not do much from the beginning to the end. Not to mention one Dreadlord. Even if half a dozen came, Duque was confident that he could hold on for more than 15 minutes. After all, not every Dreadlord was as powerful as he was. Moreover, Illidan had already gone to find trouble with the boss of the Dreadlord, Tichondrius. Therefore, there were only 3 Dreadlords who were truly qualified to effect this battle. Excluding those who were still in charge of Lordaeron, there was only one Dreadlord who could come. Moreover, the Dreadlord was following Archimonde's orders to take over the Scourge army. Under normal circumstances, no one would come to save Arthas except for the people from Nazul's line. Now was the time when Nazul's line was at its weakest. After thinking about it, the only one who would come to save the two fools was the loyal Kel Thuzad. But a Kel Thuzad wanted to save them? That was underestimating the Alliance. Almost at the same time as Jaina provoked Arthas again and sought refuge with Duque, a portal suddenly appeared less than 2 meters away from Arthas. At the same time, several huge portals the size of basketball courts appeared above everyone's heads. From inside, countless powerful undead monsters poured down as if they were free. "Go." It was Kel Thuzad's voice. Arthas suddenly came to a realization. That's right. Everything was King provocation. It wasn't easy to catch him, and the Alliance couldn't wait for him to fight to the death with these musclemen. Arthas could not help but feel a surge of warmth in her heart. How ironic. Who would have thought that in the end, it wasn't the great Lich Anastrian who came to save him. Instead, it was Kel Thuzad, who he had single-handedly killed, who pulled him back at the crucial moment. "Hey. I didn't waste half of the Sunwell's power to resurrect you in vain." This was what Arthas thought. The experts on the periphery, who had been idling for a long time, immediately perked up. "Ha!" Riadaline bellowed. The hammer and shield in her hand clashed, producing a crisp clanging sound. Even as a woman, her long experience in frontline battles made every move of hers filled with fierce pressure. Of course, she knew that she was not the main force of the assault force. In terms of long-range damage output, the nearby players completely outclassed her. Originally, Lilith pulling the bowstring 4 times in a second and firing 3 times each time was already very crazy. But compared to Ronan and Kale, who were in a human-shaped artillery formation, she was still very weak. Just as the 3 holy knights surrounded Arthas, the 2 radiant moon archmages, who were second only to Breaking Dawn archmages, quickly constructed a temporary medium-sized war magic formation. That's right, it was not a small one but a medium-sized one. Powerful magic stones that were enough to make an ordinary radiant moon archmage a lifetime's worth were inserted into the nodes of the magic formation as if they were free of charge, acting as the magic formation's auxiliary source of magic power. Almost at the same time that the elite undead monsters in the sky emerged from the teleportation portal, violent firepower shot up like countless fireworks from the ground, producing all kinds of strange sounds as they soared into the sky. It was 2 torrential magic rains that seemed to violate the laws of nature, falling from the ground to the sky. Ronan's arcane storm and Kale, that skyrocketing fire pillar, easily tore the terrifying monsters that these elite holy knights would need to spend a long time to deal with into pieces. The body parts that fell from the sky didn't even fall to the ground before they were blown up by the seemingly endless magic attacks, turning into even finer pieces. Of course, all of this was just a diversion. The focus was never on these elite undead monsters. Seeing that the cannon fodder couldn't interfere with the Alliance's hunting team, Arthas couldn't help but spit in his heart. He had to rely on himself. Unfortunately, just as he swung his sword fiercely at Mograine and Turalian, using the terrifying evil energy to form a sword ray to avoid them, and was about to step into the teleportation portal, suddenly, there was a crisp explosion from the portal in front of him. It was like the sound of a glass mirror being smashed. In Arthas's ears, this was undoubtedly the sound of destruction. Using his elemental senses, he sensed who the culprit was. Following the direction of his senses, Arthas saw an unsurprising fellow, Duke Marcus. Even though Duque seemed to be just a bystander, in reality, Duque was the key to this hunt. Without Duque, Arthas could be rescued at any time. As soon as Duque made his move, he crushed the teleportation portal that could have allowed the second fool to escape from the tragedy. Traversing tens of thousands of miles of space, sensing the location he wanted to teleport to, and then eliminating the obstacles in the spatial passageway between the teleportation portals, or directly creating a spatial passageway to avoid all the spatial cracks. Was this something a mortal could do? Absolutely impossible. Before the magic civilization had gone through a few transformations in Azeroth and then flourished, the teleportation portal was the patent of the Radiant Moon Pharaoh and above. If one wanted to use it well, one had to be at least a Breaking Dawn. It wasn't that Duque's spatial magic was completely superior to Kel'Thuzad's, but that Duque had the advantage of being closer. At this time, it was already very impressive for human archers to be able to shoot 50 steps on flat ground. Any further and it would be useless. It was the same for magic. The further the distance, the more power was reduced. Kel'Thuzad, who was still in Lordaeron, wanted to cross space to save the second fool, but did he ask Duque? Duque didn't even need to spend a lot of effort to crush Kel'Thuzad's unstable teleportation portals. Arthas's entire body convulsed. He was angry. Not only was he angry at Duque for kicking him into a corner, he was also angry at Duque's actions. Chapter 902. That was because it wasn't Jaina who was hugging Duque, but Duque who was acting righteously was protecting Jaina. Yes, he was hugging her back with his right hand, while his wrist went under Jaina's armpit and hugged her. Although the claw seemed to be subconsciously resting on the right side of her breastplate, it looked like that bastard Duque was holding her breasts. Jaina wasn't an idiot, nor was she an ordinary woman. The ice element surrounding her body was connected to her magic circuit. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the ice element around her was her second layer of skin. How could she not sense Duque's little action? What the hell was that she had said those harsh words? She would rather be Duque's lover than Arthas' queen. Now that your lover is here, if Arthas notices anything that you're unwilling to do, everything that you've done before will be for nothing. Jaina even began to suspect that Duque, who was a bumpkin in the eyes of other nobles, didn't understand ancient Arthi. Fine. That wasn't the point. Jaina had never rejected Duque from the beginning. Unfortunately, a woman chasing a man with a veil was a deadly veil that she couldn't pierce even after a dozen years. Furthermore, after Duque supported her in developing Theramore and promised to help her kill Archimonde on Mount Hyjal, her sincerity, which she had never truly given, seemed to be showing signs of melting. It had nothing to do with a terrible and helpless political deal. It was purely the admiration of a strong woman toward a man who was willing to support her career. It was the faint admiration of a woman toward a hero who was willing to help her take revenge. Ah, so what if I'm a lover? Even if I'm a lover, it's better than becoming the queen of an ugly, undying monster. Jaina really thought that way and did it. Even though she knew that Duque was mocking Arthas and that it was likely an act, Jaina didn't mind making it real. So, she snuggled into Duque's arms with a satisfied and incomparably seductive expression. She wanted to take revenge on Arthas with her actions. That's right. It was you who summoned Archimonde, you bastard. No matter how much I hate my father, even if I can't inherit the throne because of my big brother, that's still my family's business. It's your fault that the demon you released killed my father and big brother's family. You're also my enemy. Jaina, the social butterfly in history and the movie queen of this world, played the role of a lover brilliantly. She didn't mind the existence of Sylvanas, who was theoretically Duque's legal wife. Her vivid expression was clearly saying, "Darling, harder, harder." The movie queen's performance provoked Arthas's anger. Very rarely, when Kel'Thuzad's rescue became impossible, Arthas lost her mind. Ah! As Arthas shouted, the frostmourne in his hand suddenly changed. The long and wide blade instantly became dark and gloomy, like the suction of a long vacuum cleaner, swallowing the dark power within an unknown radius of countless kilometers. Then Arthas began to charge. It was a death charge that contained the strongest power he could gather. Every step he took on the ground would cause darkness within dozens of steps. Plants would wither and all living things would wither. Mograine and Turalyon used both hands to hold the divine weapons in their hands tightly. The golden light of Ashbringer and Quel'Azerim became even more dazzling and resplendent. An opponent who was enraged to the point of losing his mind was the best prey in the eyes of a hunter. But the craziness of a cornered beast meant that one mistake would cost them their lives. Every strong person's face was full of solemnity. Finally, the first attack without any fancy moves came. It was an extremely simple head-on chop. It was a posture without any technical content. Almost every warrior had practiced this chop tens of thousands of times since they were young. It was because it was simple that it was pure. Mograine could dodge but he couldn't. Behind him were Duque and Jaina, and further away was Ronan, who was standing in the magic circle and unable to move. He could retreat, Duque and Jaina could retreat, but Ronan would definitely be out of luck. They were going to fight the Archherons soon. If possible, it was best to preserve the combat power of every strong person. Moreover, speaking of righteousness, Mograine had never been afraid of anyone after obtaining Ashbringer. In the next second, a heavy collision of light against darkness, strength against strength, shook everyone's eardrums. Bang! It wasn't the clanging sound of metal colliding, but the surging explosion of two masses of energy colliding. The entire world seemed to be divided into two halves at this moment. To the south was Mogaine's blazing light. To the north was Arthas's cold darkness. Light and darkness collided violently, bursting forth in this place. Within a radius of 100 meters, everything that had nothing to do with light and darkness was crushed into powder by the violent energy. Unfortunately, this was the decaying Fellwood forest, which was filled with the power of death and evil. In a sense, this was already half of Arthas's home ground. Mograine was very strong. His wild and pure holy light was amplified by Ashbringer, and he could suppress Arthas in terms of individual strength. However, Arthas never fought alone. Frostmourne stored the power of darkness refined from nearly 10 million vengeful spirits. Arthas, who was going all out, sent Mograine flying in a single blow. But it didn't matter. In the next moment, Turalyon had already arrived. Without giving Arthas any time to react, Quel'Azerim's golden light dazzled Arthas's undead vision. Another head-on collision of light and darkness. This time it was launched while Arthas's old strength had just dissipated, and he hadn't recovered yet. Turalyon was halfway to success. The brilliant golden light suppressed the dark light, causing Arthas to stagger and take 3 steps back. Good chance. Saidan Dathrahan seized this opportunity and pounced from behind Arthas. Arthas's rune sword had been hit to the left. In Saidan's view, this fallen prince had only 2 directions to attack. One was to take advantage of the situation and stab Frostmourne from the left, but this would hit the big shield that Arthas had prepared. The other option was to use a stronger force to pull out the sword and turn around to slash. This was certainly powerful, but the problem was that such a move would take more time. If he couldn't hit the enemy, everything would be useless. Saidan also guarded against the right. But the terrifying Frostmourne stabbed from an angle that Saidan never expected. It wasn't until the evil black blade pierced through the armor and muscles of his chest that he realized what had happened. Arthas pierced his abdomen with the magic sword and then stabbed him. Mortals would die together in this way, but Arthas was an undead. Chapter 903. If Saidan Dathrahan had not stepped into the realm of heroes, such a tricky and mysterious attack would have killed him. As one of the strongest warriors in the human camp, Saidan's speed and reflexes were undoubtedly beyond his prime. At 33 years old, he was in the prime of a man's life. Perhaps his speed and reflexes were not as good as when he had just become a paladin. After all, he was only 18 years old. But after so many years of military life, his combat skills and awareness were undoubtedly at the peak. From the beginning of the Second World War at the Dark Portal to the second invasion led by Nazul, to the repeated tug-of-war with Grom Hellscream's Warsong clan in the Tirisful woodlands, Saidan had always been on the front line. So in the end, even though Frostmourne had already pierced through the line of defense formed by his sword and shield like a venomous snake, and pierced through his chest armor, he could even feel the instant pain from his chest and the numbness from the ice seal. Even though the bystanders cried out in shock and everyone thought he was going to die, he did not give up. It was a backward lean similar to the Iron Bridge of China's Kung Fu. In Azeroth's combat training, there had never been such a posture. Lordaeron's swordsmanship training focused on the extremely strict T-step, where the toes were almost 90 degrees apart. This way, whether it was advancing or retreating, moving left or right, it was very flexible. However, only experienced warriors who had fought against the Horde for a long time would understand that in the face of enemies like the Orcs, whose strength and speed were far superior to their own, the T-step was nonsense. In the face of such overwhelming power, as long as he used any method, no matter how pathetic he was, he could teach those flawed Orcs a lesson after dodging the first blow. Saidan knew that if he leaned back like this, as long as Arthas's magic sword pressed down, he would still be a corpse. In that case, he would at most live for a tenth of a second longer than before. But he had to gamble. He gambled that someone would come to save him in the next moment. This person would not be Mograine or Turalyon. Both of them had tried their best. Then, would the final redemption in despair come? Saidan prayed in the darkest of despair. Then he saw light. Golden light. Normally, non-clerics could not have golden light. However, the unquestionable divine aura told him that it was indeed holy light. Saidan's mouth was wide open. It was as if he had seen the arrival of an angel who could slay evil and exorcise demons. Although the angel looked very strange, he was wearing the typical Stormwind blue and white knight's uniform with gold trim, but he was not wearing a single piece of armor. The angel who descended from the sky held a staff that emanated a purplish-blue radiance in one hand and a golden holy sword that seemed to be used for important rituals in the other. It was a sword that was extremely precise. That was also a sword that saved lives. Like the most dexterous tailor in the world, it accurately pierced Frostmourne's blade like a needle. If it was an ordinary epic-ranked longsword, it would be impossible to block or delay Arthas' demonic sword in the slightest. However, this sword exuded the same holy radiance as Quell, Zarum. Dang. A crisp sound tugged at everyone's heartstrings. A miracle had happened. The slender holy sword miraculously forced away the blade of Frostmourne that was about to slash down. Even though Arthas had already lowered his wrist with force, it was this difference of a millimeter that caused his sword to slash diagonally to the right instead of downwards. It was this little barrier between life and death that Saidan grasped. His right shoulder sank and he rolled on the ground in a very ugly manner. In the end, he escaped the fate of having his intestines cut open. This was not without a price. The breastplate on his right chest was shattered into pieces, and a terrifying wound that was 4 centimeters deep was pulled out horizontally on his chest. A black icy aura was corroding Saidan's body at a high speed. Without even a tenth of a second of hesitation, Saidan Dathrahan directly used his ultimate move. Holy Healing. It was a peerless ultimate move that could reverse life and death at a critical moment. Paladins who had not stepped into the realm of heroes were not even qualified to use this ultimate move. The core of this move was to exhaust every drop of power in the user's body, every bit of holy light, and then instantly erupt to heal the target. As long as the target was still breathing, he could instantly restore his HP and resurrect on the spot. Under the dazzling holy light, not only did the wound on Saidan's chest recover in the blink of an eye, but it also forced out all the icy aura and dark power that Frostmourne had left in his body. Of course, such a heaven-defying ultimate move was not without a price. A moment ago, Saidan was still lively and strong like a bull, but now his mental state was like that of an old man in his 70s or 80s, extremely dispirited. After all, This was a life-saving ultimate move that squeezed out all of his essence, energy and spirit. From his stamina to his magic power to his vitality, and to his spirit, everything was drained. When the angel used the perfect, arcane impact, to send Sidon flying out of the main battlefield and to the side of another paladin, Riadaline, the people who were relieved suddenly discovered the truth of the angel. Damn, why does this guy look exactly like Duque? That's impossible? No. This guy is Duque. You. Turning to the side, Arthas's expression was extremely ferocious. This was a counterattack that he had planned for a long time, but it was ruined by an unexpected person. And that person was the person he hated the most, Duque. How is this possible? Forcefully pulling Frostmourne out of his body, the wound made a rotting sound like rotten wood being sawed. At the same time, Arthas once again parried the attacks from Mograine and Turalian. It's you? Arthas didn't even look at the two paladins as he stared at Duque, who had a staff in his left hand and a sword in his right. On the other side, Sidon, who had barely escaped death, subconsciously clutched his chest. With Riadaline's support, he looked up weakly. Damn it. Don't tell me that you, a Breaking Dawn Archmage, are actually a warrior. Hearing Satan's teasing tone, Turalian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Since he could still joke, it meant that he wouldn't die. No matter what, Sidon owed Duque his life. Speaking of which, since when did Duque become a close combat professional? But it didn't matter. This was comrade in arms. A comrade in arms surprise was always better than an enemy's shock. A sense of trust evolved from gratitude arose spontaneously in his heart. However, a new problem arose. Without Sidon Dathrahan, the situation of the siege was broken. Everyone knew that even though Riadaline had also stepped into the realm of heroes, she was still far from the strongest of the 5 Silver Saints. Chapter 904. At this time, both sides resumed their stalemate. Jaina's expression turned ugly. This is your plan? Arthas waved his magic sword, and a wave of icy ripples appeared in the area. Plan? No. This is all part of your plan. I fell for it. I really fell for it. At this time, Arthas turned to look at Duque and revealed a cruel smile. Do you know? Duque, you're really good at using people's hearts. You've provoked me. You and Jaina have really hurt my heart. Unfortunately. You don't have any humanity left. But you've always pretended to have humanity. Duque said with absolute certainty. Yes. Human nature was indeed a burden. If it was me in the past, I would have fallen for it. Arthas's smile was full of mockery. He turned to Jaina again. Of course, if you hadn't provoked my terrible memories, I might not have done anything. I would have just completed the task given to me by my lord. But if there's a chance, I don't mind turning all the women Duke Marcus cares about into corpses, and all the men into death knights or liches. Corpses? Although he didn't understand what it was, he could infer from the words that it was most likely to turn beautiful princesses into undead for viewing and obscene entertainment. Jaina's face instantly turned red. Not only was she angry at these words, but also because she had just pretended to be a lover. Whether it was real or fake, she looked like a clown now. Was it easy for a dignified queen to put on a show here? Fortunately, Duque helped Jaina out. Your Majesty Proudmoore, it's been hard on you to test the waters. Please leave the rest to me. Send Thorham to Theramore first, then come back as soon as possible. Yes. Jaina did as she was told. Test? Yes. Perhaps it was a test or perhaps it was an act. Anyway, it seemed like a super boss like Arthas who could fight and take damage. Duque really didn't expect to kill him in one go. In order to make this unstable factor leave the battlefield as soon as possible, regardless of whether it was the goddess of fate causing trouble or if other existences suddenly intervened, Duque had to kill Arthas here. Even if he took a step back, he could at least ensure that he would not be able to participate in the Battle of Mount Hyjal. That's right, Arthas did not appear in the historical Battle of Mount Hyjal. He and Azul were also excluded from the main force of the Burning Legion because they belonged to Kill Jaden. Duque did not dare to gamble. After all, even Karzak could defy history and jump out, and even Deathwing could be killed in advance. Duque really didn't know if Archimonde would let Arthas take the bullet if he was forced into a corner. Duke didn't dare to imagine what would happen if another super boss entered the fray in such a tense situation. At that time, it wouldn't just be a bloodbath, it would be total annihilation. Now, reality had proven that the power of a radiant moon was completely useless against Arthas. Jaina's icicles, frost arrows, and whatnot were all automatically disintegrated before they could even get within a 5-meter radius of Arthas. In a physical sense, they instantly disintegrated into water vapor, followed by wandering frost elementals. What's worse was that the wandering frost elementals were being used by Arthas. And Duque sensed for a moment. Even with his breaking dawn strength, he still couldn't deal much damage to Arthas, who was basically a demigod. In his heart, Duque spat fiercely. But it didn't matter. Duque got into a stance and muttered in his heart, "All right. Now my left hand is staff maker, and my right hand is sword seller. 10 meters away I'll lower your IQ. 100 meters away I'm asking you, how are you going to block it?" Taking a deep breath, Duque got into a stance. In this era where battle mages were still a novelty, Duque's stance, which was written as a mage, was read as a berserker. Let alone the enemy, even his own people were dumbfounded. "Alexandros, Turalian, you two go. I'll use a phantom clone to support you." Mograine and Turalian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Duque wasn't a true melee fighter and he didn't have any teamwork. If that small body of his rushed over, they really didn't know how to cooperate. That's right, Duque wasn't short and he also had steel-like muscles, but he wasn't wearing any armor. Although no armor could block a full blow from Frostmourne, if an elite ghoul came, their epic armor would be useful. Fortunately, Duque was a phantom and he came to help. The battle started again. Now it was Mograine and Turalian in the vanguard, flanking Arthas from the left and right. Queen Sylvanas continued to wait for opportunities to shoot arrows, and the berserker Duque shouted, "May the holy light shine on you," and rushed forward. No one expected the situation to be completely different. A phantom of Duque appeared 10 meters in front of Arthas. It did nothing but cast speed reduction on the fool. The magic of a Breaking Dawn mage could affect a demigod, even if it was very slight, but Turalian and Turalian immediately felt the difference. Life and death were on the line, and this was no exaggeration. The other phantom was even more savage. Holding a staff in its left hand and a sword in its right, it directly turned into a thief and rushed forward, stabbing Arthas's back. Arthas was so angry that his nose was almost crooked. He was a dead man. He used his advantage as an immortal to the limit. He had used his broken arm to kill Orgrim. He had also used his own body to almost kill a general of the Alliance. However, he had never seen such a shameless person. He actually used his doppelganger to rush over with 2 weapons and launch a barrage of attacks. As a human, there were too many places to defend. If a leg was cut off, he wouldn't be able to walk. If an arm was cut off, he wouldn't be able to attack. If an artery was pierced, he would bleed to death, and if a vital point was injured, he would also die. But how could a phantom with 2 weapons have any weak points? Either he directly destroyed these 2 weapons, or he crossed the distance of nearly 100 meters to attack Duque's body. Otherwise, Arthas would only be left with the option of being beaten up. If Duque's 2 weapons were trash or just simple magic attacks, Arthas wouldn't care at all. The problem was that these 2 weapons were a demigod, Obsidian Queen, and the other was a strange holy sword that looked like a phantom of Quell Zarum, which was a divine weapon. One was used as a milk bottle to supply mana, while the other was agilely stabbing at the wound that was caused by the idiot just now. Frostmourne pierced Arthas's abdomen, but it didn't cause any real damage. But when it pierced through, it also pierced through the ink-black skeleton armor on Arthas's body. Since it was a phantom that went up, the shameless Duque directly let the phantom stab at a speed of more than a dozen times per second, playing with the holy sword like a flower sword and stabbing non-stop. "Look at my sword manipulation technique." Du Xiaoyao smirked. Chapter 905. The undead were never afraid of physical attacks. Arrows and piercing weapons had been proven useless in countless battles. The best choice was holy light followed by magic. If there was no other choice, one could at least use a large hammer to smash the undead into pieces and immobilize them. At first, Arthas looked down on Duque for using a rapier, but he soon realized that he was wrong. And very wrong. The shameless Duque was actually cheating the special effect. All weapons' special effects had activation limits. For example, how many attacks could it be used once and how many seconds could it be used once? The key was that activating the special effect needed to be charged. However, Duque, who knew all this, charged the holy sword like he was loading bullets into a pistol. The Obsidian Queen, in the clone's left hand, ensured that the holy sword could be replenished with magic. And on the clone, Duque left Alonso's Fail's moral gold coin. In the 10 years that he was sent into the void with Karazhan, Duque did not think that this gold coin, which was connected to his mind, was very powerful. With his return, Duque suddenly realized that this gold coin was not as simple as he thought. For example, Mediva's moral was used up after it was used. If Mediva's moral was a disposable alkaline battery, then Alonso's Fail's spiritual gold coin was a rechargeable battery that could be recharged again and again. Under the careful analysis of the system, it was found that it could absorb the prayers of devout believers who believed in the doctrine of the holy light within 100 meters and increased the moral inside. Oh, it was the power of the holy light. This was the biggest reason why Duque could use the moral gold coin as a weapon. Now Duque put this gold coin into the clone. So a strange scene appeared on the battlefield. Compared to Maugraine's Ashbringer, which was as huge as a door, the unknown holy sword that Duque's clone was holding was as thin as an embroidery needle. But it was this embroidery needle that made a terrifying explosion. The special effect, Holy Arrow, would be triggered 2 to 3 times every second, and from an outsider's point of view, it was even fiercer than the Dwarven tank squad's cannons. It was accompanied by the incessant sounds of chi-chi-chi-chi-chi. With a whooshing sound, Duque relied on the agility of the holy sword to continuously send holy light into the wound on Arthas' back. Because Arthas Frostmourne was too large, it was like a cannon hitting a mosquito. It could not hit Duque's holy sword at all. Doppelganger? Chop if you want. In any case, it was just a virtual image. It didn't matter if you cut it in half or split it in half. As long as you didn't hit the 2 weapons and the spirit coin in the doppelganger, no matter how many doppelgangers you destroyed, Duque would be able to summon another one in the next moment. Continue selling swords. Continue crafting the staff. This also increased the success rate of Queen Sylvie's sneak attacks. This scene made all the experts of the Alliance who were paying attention to the battle excited. Jaina's beautiful eyes shone brightly. No. Impossible. Arthas screamed. As Kel'Thuzad's attempt to open a portal was interrupted by Duque's main body again, everyone knew that the scales of victory were tipping towards the Alliance. More than once, Arthas wanted to rush over and use Death's Grasp to catch Duque. In the end, he was either interrupted by Turalyon and Maugraine, or Riadaline, who was fully focused, used Holy Light to defeat Arthas. The Blood Elf Paladin could not fight against Frostmourne, but it did not mean that he could not deal with Arthas's dark magic, which was not too strong. She used her slightly slender body as a shield, blocking in front of Duque's main body. Since ancient times, quantitative change had always easily led to qualitative change. After being hit too many times, Arthas could not take it anymore. He gave up on his humanity, only making his evil soul purer and able to accommodate more dark power. After all, he was not a Lich King at this point in time, and he did not have the terrifying strength to kill young Saluphar in one move after becoming a Lich King. After Arthas's waist was hit by Holy Arrow, for the 100th time, the holy energy that had accumulated in his abdomen finally affected his movements. First, Maugraine's powerful horizontal slash forced him to take it head-on. Then Turalyon's Quell Zalim, without any fancy moves, shattered Arthas' right pauldron and pierced straight into his right arm. Ah! Arthas howled like a trapped beast, but it did not help. Taking advantage of the fact that he was not holding the magic sword firmly, Maugraine used his strength to press down on the magic sword's blade. Then he immediately slashed from another angle, aiming at the fallen prince's abdomen that had accumulated a lot of holy light. This time there was no escape. The strengthened frost armor could not save Arthas. The evil power of darkness was instantly melted by the light of Ashbringer. The giant sword slashed into his abdomen, triggering a chain reaction of holy light inside. Finally, under this dazzling strike, under the gaze of nearly 10 pairs of Alliance powerhouses, the fallen prince, Arthas Menethil, who killed his father and master, was cut in half by Maugraine's divine weapon, the giant sword. The lower half of his body, which was still twitching, was still shaking on the spot, but he did not fall. Because of the momentum, Arthas' upper body flew up and fell a few meters away. Everyone knew that this was not the end. Duque shouted, "Last hit." Although Turalyon did not understand why it was the last hit and not the sword, it did not affect his actions. Almost as soon as Arthas' body flew away from his sword, Turalyon suddenly stomped on the ground and flew out. He raised the divine sword Quell Zalim high and slashed at Arthas again. As long as the sword struck Arthas' head, the almighty fallen prince who had brought disaster to most of the Rotterdam kingdom would become history after that moment. That's right. The undead could be resurrected. But the premise was that the soul was still there. Paladins did not have the power to expiate evil spirits, but it did not mean that the divine weapons of the holy system did not exist. In order to deal with Arthas, Duque collected all the evil weapons of this time. Was it not to get rid of him once and for all? As long as it hit, no matter how powerful the evil spirit was, its existence would definitely be completely erased from this world. Duque let out the most nervous roar in his heart. Motherf asterisk cur. How Duque hoped that after this sword hit, there would be no more problems with the Scourge army. Dreams were beautiful. Reality was cruel. A huge white bone claw suddenly appeared out of thin air. It was so huge, like a terrifying wall of white bones, firmly blocking between Arthas and Turalyon. This block was like a natural moat. Duque's face suddenly lost all color. *CK. What is this? Chapter 906. Looking at the system prompt that labeled the claw as Mother of the Frost Dragons, Syndagosa, Duque felt as disgusted as if he had eaten a fly. *CK me. Didn't I remind Malygos to help move Syndagosa's grave? What has this silly blue dragon king been doing all this time? Did this guy not take what I said seriously at all? Duque was infuriated. He was not afraid of a godlike boss, but he was afraid of a pig-like teammate. He did not do what he was told to do, and instead sent a strong fighter to the enemy. How could he tolerate such a teammate? At this moment, Duque even wanted to kill Malygos. However, the next moment, when Duque stared at the pale and huge bone claw, a cluster of resentful thoughts was analyzed by the system elf. It was a crazy resentment that had almost solidified into a solid form. In a trance, Duque saw this illusion. A long time ago, the chromatic dragons were given the mission of guarding the world of Azeroth. One day, Nesario created the soul of the dragon and used the excuse of fighting against the Burning Legion to deceive the other dragons into injecting their power into this artifact. In the sky above the Well of Eternity, Nesario openly betrayed his former brothers and sisters. Malygos and his beloved consort, Syndagosa, led their blue dragons to surround the Guardian of the Earth in an attempt to annihilate this great traitor of the dragons. They attacked Nesario, but Nesario used the soul of the dragon to kill almost all the blue dragons in an instant. Syndagosa was sent flying all the way to the extreme north. She, who could no longer fly, fell headfirst into the frozen soil of the Ice Crown. She was blind and on the verge of death. She desperately struggled in the direction of the Dragonbone Waste. That was the resting place of the dragons. She gathered all her remaining power and called for Malygos to help her, but the only response she got was the howling of the cold wind. The distance was too far. She desperately and painfully realized that she could no longer reach the Dragonbone Waste to rest in peace. Her sanity slowly faded along with her life. In the madness before her death, there was only hatred left in her heart. Hatred for the Burning Legion, hatred for Nesario, and even hatred for Malygos. But most of all, it was hatred for the entire world of mortals. At the moment of her death, Syndagosa swore, "Revenge." Lich King Nazul resurrected her and gave her a chance for revenge. She also became one of the leaders of Ice Crown Castle, the mother of all frost dragons. The image ended here. The bone dragons were not liches. What little rationality they had left was not enough to hide their thoughts. This was not important. Their strength made up for everything. Only Duque knew that perhaps it was the changes in fate that made everything messed up. According to the original history, Syndagosa would need at least another 20 years to come out, but he attacked Arthas ahead of time. As a result, the current Lich King Nazul went to resurrect Syndagosa. If that was the case, then Nazul had long since set his eyes on Syndagosa, who wasn't in the Dragonbone Waste. It was just that for some reason he didn't revive her at the start of the third battle at the Dark Portal. Perhaps it was to nurture the dark power of the Mother of the Frost Dragons, or for some other reason. Duque could suddenly understand why Malygos, the Blue Dragon King, did not bring Syndagosa's remains back. When love turned into hate, the more love there was, the more hate there was. The death of his partner was a tragedy. But to find out that his partner's hatred for him had not dissipated even after 10,000 years had passed was unbearable for anyone. Bringing the remains of a dragon with such resentment back to the Dragonbone Wasteland was like inviting a wolf into the house and tearing down his ancestral grave. Alright, understanding is one thing. If you didn't move the grave, Malygos, you bastard, you should have told me or my people. You bastard blue dragon, you've screwed me over. Well, understanding was not the same as understanding. Du hated Malygos, who had not buried his wife's body for 10,000 years. Without the mess Malygos had left behind, how could Syndagosa have interfered? Teleportation with enemy interference was extremely dangerous. If it had been a human, they would have been turned to dust long ago. But Syndagosa, who was a blue dragon, was different. His body was unimaginably tough and could withstand even more spatial distortion. That was why Nazul had personally intervened and used Syndagosa's claws to save Arthas. Duke Marcus. I will be back. I will definitely be back. When I return, it will be the end of all living beings in this world. Arthas, who only had half of his body left, laughed maniacally in the gap between Syndigos's claws. Duque bared his teeth and ordered, Mograine, Turallion, destroy his evil half. The two holy knights immediately understood. Right in front of the furious Arthas, two holy swords chopped down, completely disintegrating the lower half of Arthas' body. No! With Arthas' angry roar, the frost dragon's bone claws finally disappeared into the huge portal. A smile finally appeared on Duque's lips. The Lich King Nazul had originally wanted Arthas' body. Now that half of the fallen prince's body had been destroyed, would Arthas become the next Lich King in the end? This was really a thought-provoking conjecture. As Arthas retreated in a sorry state, the entire forest finally returned to silence. Mograine and the others gathered around. This battle of ours. Turallion was a little hesitant. Duque let out a long breath. At least it was a success. The body of a Death Knight can indeed be reconstructed, but the new creation is definitely not as good as the original. We can at least be sure that Arthas will not interfere in the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. At least no one from the Alliance died, but half of Arthas' strength had been destroyed. Duque turned to Turallion and asked, after using holy healing, Saidan? Turallion smiled. It's no big deal. He just overdrew his energy. The holy light is not dark energy, so there won't be any side effects. Just give that guy an extra chicken leg for his 3 meals. However, I'm afraid we can't count on Saidan's combat power for the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Duque waved his hand, indicating that it was fine. He had brought so many people with him just to be on the safe side. After all, in the original history, the Alliance had only sent Jaina's Theramore expeditionary force. Suddenly, in the far north of Felwood Forest, a huge wave of dark energy shocked everyone. That's... Queen Sylvanas was shocked. It's nothing, Duque patted Queen Sylvanas on the shoulder and smiled. A Dreadlord must have died. Chapter 907. How awesome would a legendary hero who had stepped into the realm of heroes be? Just look at an egg. 10,000 years ago, Illidan used the power of a demon to destroy the Burning Legion. What arcane power could not do, the demon's dark energy did. Even when he was captured and locked up for 10,000 years, he never changed his mind. Anyone who was locked up in a sealed space without seeing the sun or moon for a month would go insane, let alone 10,000 years. Fortunately, Illidan was blind 10,000 years ago, or he would have gone even crazier. Even though he was suspicious of Arthas' motives, Illidan was still thirsty for magic. He felt that with the power of Gul'dan's skull, he should be able to defeat the Burning Legion's army in Felwood Forest. So, he easily took down the demon guards guarding the artifact and got what he wanted. Hiss. Illidan gasped, then he was immediately amazed by the power contained in the magic artifact. A normal magic artifact would not be able to attract Illidan. But how attractive was this divine artifact-level magic artifact to him? To put it simply, he was willing to be a moth to a flame. What? Gul'dan was a demigod, and after he jumped ship from a shaman to a warlock, his strength was undoubtedly top-notch. The key was that he died in the tomb of Sargeras. Gul'dan, who had a powerful soul and unparalleled resentment, was immersed in the dark power that flowed out of the tomb of Sargeras for a long time after his death. This made the quality of the entire magic artifact even higher. Illidan would never forget the scene of him activating the power that Sargeras bestowed upon him during the War of the Ancients, and the powerful power that he could not stop. He could still remember the feeling of the powerful energy flowing through his limbs. This addiction made Illidan choose to absorb the power of Gul'dan's skull without hesitation. Just a small portion, but he was like Popeye eating fresh spinach, the muscles in his limbs all swelled up. If he did not restrain himself, perhaps he would have completely turned into a demon. Even so, after Illidan absorbed the power of Gul'dan's skull, he immediately turned into a demigod. Huff, huff. Illidan's enlarged nostrils spewed out turbid dark power. He enjoyed this feeling very much. Unlike those pitiful wretches who were overwhelmed by the violent power, Illidan was very clear-headed. He knew what he wanted and what he had to do. Now it's time to complete Tyron's quest. With power, nothing was a problem. With the magical profession of demon hunter, Illidan's body was like a black gust of wind, shuttling between the tall trees of Felwood Forest. The stench of a demon floating in the forest was the best guide. It was no different from having a radar. It was just that Illidan was extremely sensitive to demons. The pollution isn't enough. The great master is about to obtain the treasure from the endless sea. He will come soon, so we must clear the path first. A greenish-black shadow suddenly shot out from the jungle like a bolt of lightning. Like a crescent moon, dozens of demon heads with long curved horns soared into the sky. Even the leader of the Dreadlords, Tichondrius, couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. A powerful enemy. Who is it? Accompanied by a curse, the Dreadlord raised his hand and cast Putrid Hornet Swarm. A large number of creatures and insects that lived in the darkness responded to the Dreadlord's summon. This black wave of foul aura immediately turned the entire area into a kingdom of death. If Illidan was still in the cone-shaped area that was being attacked, he would have turned into a pile of scarlet bones. He was too fast. The speed of an agile hero was definitely beyond the imagination of mortals. It looked like he had been hit, but in reality Tichondrius had missed by at least 90 degrees. Without giving the Dreadlord any time to react, his winged back suddenly had two horrifying bone-deep wounds. One could even see that his shoulder blades, which were many times harder than steel, had also been cut deep by the sword. Tichondrius was scared out of his wits. What made him even more worried was yet to come. The dark energy circuit in his body was suddenly disrupted by a very terrifying force. A force that was even more intense than fire rushed into his dark energy circuit. Not only did it evaporate at least 1/5 of his dark energy, but it also caused a chaotic shock wave that caused damage to his internal organs. While he was not paying attention, consecutive slashes landed on his left rib. This caused the Dreadlord to let out the loudest cry of pain since the start of the battle. Just as he half knelt down, 2 more slashes landed on his right leg. Illidan turned into a tornado as he circled around Tichondrius and slashed at him at high speed. In front of Illidan, Tichondrius's movements were slower than a snail's, and each of the Dreadlord's close combat attacks was easily dodged. "No, I can't go on like this." Tichondrius suddenly blasted Putrid Hornet Swarm at the ground. Illidan frowned and could only retreat quickly. In his opinion, he had a safe enough distance from the Dreadlord. But the Dreadlord's tricks were far beyond his imagination. He suddenly felt very sleepy. In less than half a second, Illidan fell asleep. Holding twin blades of Azzinoth, he fell asleep standing on the battlefield. The Dreadlord finally let out a sinister laugh. Absolute slumber. It was a terrifying skill that could make intelligent creatures sleep until they died if they failed to resist it. The only drawback was that external damage could awaken the victim. It didn't matter. Tichondrius grabbed Illidan tightly with both claws. Yes. He wanted to tear this night elf, who had given him painful memories and didn't know what he was talking about, into two. Then he would pull out his lowly soul and torture it for thousands of years. Just as he suddenly used his magic, Illidan woke up. "Idiot. It's too late." The Dreadlord sneered. "Is that so?" Illidan replied with the same sinister smile. In the hands of the Dreadlord, Illidan was originally like a toy. But in less than 1/100th of a second, Illidan's body grew bigger, becoming taller and stronger than Tichondrius. Demon. Impossible. The Dreadlord leader's screams came to an abrupt halt, because his heart had been clawed out by the terrifying black demon. No, it wasn't just his heart. Even his soul was pulled out by the black demon. Chapter 908. If it was a normal kill, the demon's soul could easily return to the twisting nether. As long as it was someone powerful, resurrection would not be a problem. But if it was a fight between demons, that would be bad. Especially when the opponent had the power from Sargeras's origin. No, no, no. Don't kill me. Don't. Above the heart that reeked of black blood, Tichondrius's soul that was the size of a small doll begged. However, Illidan, who had turned into a black demon, had a cruel smile that was even more demonic than the Dreadlord. "Compared to letting you go, I'm more eager to see your eternal death." Illidan squeezed the Dreadlord leader's heart as he cackled like an owl. Then, in an instant, he only used his left hand to punch the Dreadlord's body that was beginning to kneel. The impact was filled with the power of darkness, and it easily blasted this body that made countless living beings tremble in fear into pieces. The next moment, a black light shot into the sky. The souls that had been killed and imprisoned by Tichondrius began to escape from their soul cages and spread in all directions. Illidan did not care about this at all. Even though he had turned back into a night elf, he still enjoyed it. He enjoyed the supreme pleasure of the powerful power flowing through every inch of his blood vessels. He laughed heartily as he held the broken heart up high, allowing the Dreadlord's heart's blood to pour over his head, face, and mouth. He wanted to savor the sweetness of this victory. He wanted to savor this crazy killing until, Illidan? The sudden exclamation made Illidan's body stiffen. He couldn't believe his ears. Yes, he was too crazy. He had forgotten himself. Even Tyrant and Malfurion, as well as the sentries and druids they brought with them, did not know when they arrived at this ruined battlefield. At least 4 digits of his fellow night elves had witnessed his transformation from a demon back to a night elf. That's right. Illidan could ignore the gazes of his fellow night elves because from the day they convicted him and sent him to the Black Prison 10,000 years ago, they were no longer his fellow night elves in his heart. However, he could not ignore the look in Tyrant's eyes, which went from concern to disappointment, and then sadness. Tyrant, Illidan said the word, I 3 times in a row. He really wanted to say, I didn't do anything wrong, I did it for you, Tyrant. But in the end he chose to remain silent. At a time like this, all excuses would only be feeble and useless nonsense. The pride in his heart did not allow him to lower his head to anyone, not even Tyrant Whisperwind, whom he had always loved. He held his head high and looked Tyrant in the eye. He was telling her with his eyes, yes, this is my Tao. I'm not wrong. Illidan gave the choice to Tyrant. Tyrant's slender body trembled uncontrollably. She was the one who had insisted on Illidan's release. In order to save Illidan, she even killed Maev Shadowsong's subordinates, creating a huge rift between her and the Night Elf hero. But how did Illidan repay her for saving him? Abandoning oneself to depravity. Once again he used the power of the devil. Stronger and crazier than before. Even if his original intention was to help her, and he even killed a powerful dreadlord for it. Unfortunately, the law was merciless. If she allowed him to continue to stay in the race, it would lead to the collapse of the ruling order of the Night Elves. Gritting her teeth and holding back her tears, Tyrant suddenly raised her head and her clear voice echoed throughout the entire Fellwood forest. Illidan Storm Rage. Even though you obeyed my orders, High Priestess Tyrant Whisperwind of the Moon God's Temple, to eliminate the demons in the Fellwood forest and kill a dreadlord, you have betrayed my trust in you. You have violated the natural teachings of the Night Elves by recklessly using the evil power of the devil. Tyrant took a step forward. 8,000 years ago, we finally decided to exile the High Elves who also abused their magic and refused to obey the orders of Elun and Cenarius. So, even though you have the heart to serve the world, we cannot accept your actions and ways. Tyrant took another step forward. As the High Priestess, I hereby sentence you, Illidan Storm Rage, to be exiled. Once you become enemies with the Night Elves on the battlefield, we will give you a merciless blow. Do you accept this sentence? It was impossible to describe Illidan's feelings at that moment. Had there been hope? Despair again? Following his heart? Unwillingness to be bound? Perhaps there was everything. However, Illidan knew that the beautiful days of his childhood and youth were gone forever. And in this lifetime he was destined to never receive Tyrant's love. But he did not regret it. He only had one word for Tyrant's reply, humph. Was it disdain? Was it contempt? Retaliation? Or something else? No one knew. The last thing the thousands of elite elves saw was the back of a lone wolf. No one knew that it would be the birth of a new legend, or the beginning of a terrifying legend. Seeing the former Night Elf powerhouse, the High Priestess' childhood friend, leave the Night Elves in such a way, every elf's heart was filled with strange feelings. Illidan left. Leading the army, Tyrant walked on the forest road, which was the path to Mount Hyjal. Malfurion, before she could finish, Malfurion interrupted, You're not wrong. Your intentions were good and you gave him a chance, but he didn't cherish it. Tyrant was silent. Malfurion continued, There's no time to be sad. According to the prophet's prophecy, the Burning Legion's main force will arrive in 3 days at most. The Night Elves can only look forward now. Yes, I heard that you met that Duque? That was 15 years ago. The previous guardian, Aegwin, asked me to go over and help. He called me through Alexstrasza and I couldn't refuse. Alexstrasza, Isra, and Nozdormu, the 3 dragon aspects, could be considered as the Night Elves' guardian deities. One gave them the World Tree. One allowed them to soar in the Emerald Dream. And one that granted them eternal life. As long as it did not go against Elun's will, the Night Elves would rarely refuse their call. No, Tyrant, what I'm concerned about is that Alliance commander, Duke Marcus. What kind of person is he? A human genius, a person who will create miracles. Tyrant gave a high evaluation without hesitation. Chapter 909. Archimonde did not reach Mount Hyjal so quickly at first. Duque was glad that this bought time for the cooperation between the Alliance tribe and the Shadow Elves. Soon Duque could not laugh anymore. Archimonde had dragged it out for too long. Whether it was the Naga in the sea or the chaos caused by the shattering of the Well of Eternity, it was impossible for them to pose too much of an obstacle to him. The only explanation was that there was something in the middle of the endless sea that attracted Archimonde. Especially when Vashj actually ran out and attacked Kul Tiras, it made Duque frown even more. So, with the alliance of the Alliance tribe and the Night Elves, the Burning Legion was not far behind. With each of them feeling uneasy, the three factions decided to hold a formal meeting in Ashenvale's Astrana. Astrana was a fortress mostly surrounded by a lake, and it looked more like a huge group of villas in the middle of a lake. The natural and gentle style of the Night Elves was on full display in the entire fortress. What was even more rare was the location of the fortress. It was located west of the entrance to the Fellwood Forest. Normally speaking, if the Burning Legion's army went to Mount Hyjal, they did not need to pass through Astrana Fortress. This made the fortress that guarded the direction to the Black Sea coast even more delicate in terms of geographical location. Although it could not become an obstacle to the Burning Legion's advance, on the other hand, it could attack the Burning Legion's flank from the fortress. Almost as soon as they saw this geographical location, the big shots of the various factions had an association. Today, Duque, Jaina, and Sylvanas represented the alliance at the meeting. On the tribe's side were Thrall, Wajin, and the Tauren chief Cain Bloodhoof. The Night Elves were naturally Tyrant and Malfurion. The Prophet Medivh, as the leader of the alliance of the three major factions, was the first to speak. I welcome everyone who is willing to put aside their prejudices and cross the boundaries of race, organization, and country to gather together. Medivh spoke in the human common language. With the support of a mysterious ancient magic called language mastery, the people of the various races could not understand the common language itself, but they magically understood the meaning of every word of Medivh. With the support of this ancient spell, everyone in the hall could easily understand each other's words. Let me emphasize that the world of Azeroth, the world tree at the top of Mount Hyjal, is a sacred tree that grows under the powerful magic spring of the Well of Eternity. It provides the endless energy for the entire world of Azeroth. If the Burning Legion were to seize the power of the World Tree, it would be equivalent to obtaining the magic spring of the Well of Eternity. In other words, all life in the world would be polluted and destroyed. Before we defeat the Burning Legion's invasion this time, no matter what kind of conflicts or blood feuds there are between the various races, I hope that we can temporarily put them aside. At a time like this, the interests of all of us are the same. At this point, the Medivh bowed in three different directions. In the remaining time, I hope that everyone can quickly come up with a mutually acceptable result. The leaders of the three parties gave friendly smiles to the Medivh. However, the atmosphere was harmonious. At the beginning of the meeting, after the Night Elves briefly introduced the military strength and defensive situation on Mount Hyjal, the three parties had a heated debate on how to join forces and defeat the Burning Legion's attack. Sal was the first to speak. Since the Night Elves' strongest defensive magic formation is set up on Mount Hyjal, then we can directly set up our defense along the mountain path. In theory this was right, but it was a pity that it stepped on the Night Elves' sore spot. Tyrant objected on the spot. Grey Valley and Fellwood Forest have been the territory of the Night Elves since 10,000 years ago. We can't sit back and watch our territory be trampled on. Moreover, we need more time to strengthen the defensive line on Mount Hyjal, and the space on the mountain that can be used for defense is limited. The Night Elves hope that the Alliance and the Horde can send extra troops to resist the Burning Legion on the way to Mount Hyjal. Wajin stood up. Does this make sense? There is a limit to the total number of troops that Archimonde can bring into Azeroth. Once the Legion suffers losses, he can almost infinitely summon new demons from the twisting nether to replace them. Tyrant emphasized, within the range of Mount Hyjal, there is a large magic formation for teleportation and summoning of demons. According to our ancient documents and records from the dragons, Archimonde is quite arrogant and confident. As long as we don't cause heavy losses to the Burning Legion, we won't provoke Archimonde to send more troops. Wajin glanced at Duque, then waved his fist. You are betting the lives of the Horde or Alliance soldiers on a result that is likely to become meaningless. Our tribe cannot accept this. Sal held Wajin down. Since the Beastmen have crossed time and space to come to Azeroth, even if we are just a foreign race, we can't change the fact that we are already living in this world. Of course, our tribe is willing to contribute to this world. But the tribe has just experienced a great change and we have less than 200,000 people left, so we can only send 40,000 elites. So, whether to push the 40,000 horde to the front line for meaningless consumption, or to build a stronger line of defense at Mount Hyjal, I leave this decision to you, Lady Tyron Whisperwind. Tyron was in a dilemma. During this period of time, the Night Elves had almost figured out the Horde's resources. Even with the addition of the Tauren and Trolls, the entire tribe only had less than 200,000 people, including the old, weak, women, and children. In theory, it was definitely good enough for the tribe to send out 40,000 soldiers. Of course, if the female beastmen and orc laborers who could also fight were counted, it was not impossible for the tribe to send out 120,000 soldiers. But then, it would really be a battle of life and death. Regardless of whether they won or not, the tribe would definitely be wiped out. Tyron couldn't help but look at the more powerful alliance. Duque smiled. Just now Sal had played a little trick. The tribe had a small population, few soldiers, and even fewer elite soldiers. In theory, of course, this was the fault of the alliance. If it weren't for Duque being blown up into the void for 10 years, the tribe wouldn't even have 100,000 people left. Duque said, "Yes, that's right. In terms of military power, our alliance is stronger, so the alliance is willing to take on more responsibilities. In fact, at this time, the alliance has already landed in Azeroth and turned the whole of Azeroth into a stronghold. But as the commander of the alliance, I don't think the Burning Legion will go through Grey Valley, Fellwood Forest, and then to the foot of Mount Hyjal." Tyron frowned. "You mean?" Duque spat out 2 words. "Over the mountain." Chapter 9-10. As soon as Duque said that, Tyrant and Malfurion felt a chill down their spines. They had been fooled by their own fixed thinking. That's right. For tens of thousands of years, if one wanted to go to Mount Hyjal from Azhara, they had to take a big detour. They had to go to Grey Valley in the west, then to Fellwood Forest in the northwest, and finally to the west of Mount Hyjal. They had to go up the mountain from the lowest mountain on the west side. But they had forgotten that as long as they did not enter Mount Hyjal, the Burning Legion's movements were not restricted. Therefore, there was a possibility that the 3 parties had set up a large number of troops in Grey Valley, but the demons did not even care about these intercepting troops. They directly ran to the mountains north of Grey Valley and followed the mountains to the higher foot of Mount Hyjal. Tyron pursed her lips. Duque said, "So, I suggest that the Alliance defend Azhara's landing point, and then defend the second battle at the foot of Mount Hyjal or in the open space halfway up the mountain. Also, the Alliance welcomes the Night Elves and the Horde to send military observers to our 2 lines of defense." No one knew what military observers were, but they could understand from the name. Duque was actually so generous as to let both sides send people to supervise the army? No, this was not even supervising the army. This was completely showing the military essence of the Alliance to a temporary ally. Queen Sylvanas couldn't sit still anymore, and the whisper of the wind drifted into Duque's ears. "Duque, is this really okay? Forget about the Night Elves, about the Horde." Duque smiled. "You don't know what kind of person the current chief of the Horde and Thrall are. Leave everything to me." Okay. Queen Sylvanas chose to believe in Duque. Looking 1 step forward and thinking 3 steps ahead was the most basic quality of a leader. What Duque had to do was think 3 steps ahead. This temporary alliance was terrible. If the world wasn't about to be destroyed, there would be no basis for an alliance at all. Everyone knew that Taurens and Orcs were the best meat shields, the High Elves were the strongest mages, the Night Elves were the best archers, the Human Knights were the flank charges, the Dwarves played with guns and tanks, and the Gnomes played with cannons. Wow! How great it was to combine the strengths of each race. Why was it that in history the 3 major factions had to each have their own camp and resist step by step? It was all because of that pile of bad debts. The Horde had just gotten rid of the Night Elf demigod Cenarius, and the Dark Elves had been enemies with the Alliance for more than 10 years. During the first and second battle of the Dark Portal, the Alliance had massacred the Alliance's cities, and then the Alliance had enslaved the Beastmen. From the perspective of their own race, it was hard to say who was in the right and who was in the wrong. The Alliance and the Night Elves weren't any better. Queen Sylvie sat next to Duque, almost dazzling Tyrant and Malfurion's eyes. The High Elves were exiled by the Nature Elves. Who would have thought that they would have to kneel on their knees and beg the prodigal son they had chased out of the family to come back and save them? If the person sitting next to Duque was a magic elven such as Kale, then it would definitely be more eye-catching. Fortunately, Queen Sylvie was a ranger, so the Night Elves felt better. To be honest, they were exiled because they hated the High Elves' abuse of magic. Duque and Jaina were also secretly provoking them. So, Duque was deliberately being so generous. It was also to pave the way for a more sincere cooperation. Here the Alliance is willing to fight 2 battles. You guys do as you see fit. Seeing Duque like this, Medivh secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The Alliance was most afraid of the other races holding onto their own pockets and refusing to give in no matter what. If this went on, the best result would be to force them into a mess. In fact, they would still be minding their own business and wouldn't be able to fight at all. The Alliance had made a good start and the rest would be much easier to handle. Medivh was the first to bow to Duque. Thank you, Duque. Thank you and the Alliance for your contribution to Azeroth. On the other side, Tyrant and Malfurion also stood up and bowed. Thrall had a bitter taste in his mouth. The Beastmen had never been a stingy race. They were straightforward and liked to repay the generosity of others with generosity. But now the Beastmen couldn't be generous. Thrall had no way of knowing whether his hometown Draenor was still there. The Alliance had blocked all news from the Dark Portal. If his hometown was as Orgrim had described, then after his hometown exploded, the Beastmen in Kalimdor would be the last of them. No matter how elite the Beastmen were, they were still too small compared to the Alliance's population of nearly 10 million. Moreover, even if they survived this crisis, who could guarantee that the Alliance wouldn't attack again? Although Thrall also understood that under the premise that the world was in danger of being destroyed, any post-war alliance would only be a piece of waste paper, Thrall's heart was still trembling. He had to stop the Burning Legion from destroying the world, but he also had to think of a way to preserve the vitality of his tribe. This was where Thrall was at a loss. Thrall was still too young. His expression was practically written all over his face. Duque couldn't help but laugh in his heart, but he kept a straight face. However, the Alliance won't be able to retreat to Mount Hyjal in time for the first battle in Azeroth. So, I hope that the Alliance's troops will be allowed to retreat if things go south. Tyrant and Thrall thought about it and nodded at the same time. Sure. After all, the Night Elves had repeatedly emphasized that they had a big move, but it needed time. On the other hand, as long as they could buy enough time, no one wanted to lose all their elites to the bottomless pit that was the Burning Legion. So, Duque pointed to a place on the large map in the middle of the conference room. I hope that when the Alliance's first line of defense can't hold on, we can retreat downstream from here. As Duque spoke, he looked at Thrall. I'm sorry, the Alliance's first line of defense is mostly mechanized troops. It will be difficult for them to retreat to Grey Valley, which is full of forests. Thrall was bitter. He instinctively wanted to refuse. Because the place that Duque pointed to was the River of Wrath. The River of Wrath was the dividing line between Azeroth and Grey Valley. The source in the north was near Mount Hyjal, but the downstream area in the south was the Horde's new main city, Orgrimmar. If it wasn't for the fact that the world could be destroyed, would the Alliance's mechanized infantry pass through the main gate of their own main city? Would the Horde be able to sleep? If Thrall was a calculating leader, then he would most likely reject the offer. But who was Thrall? The man destined to become the legendary Great Chief of the Horde. Whether it was in the original history or this life, he would be praised by countless orcs and even the Alliance. Not only was he wise, but he also had a heart that no great chief could reach, a heart of justice. From his mouth full of fangs, Thrall spat out 2 words. Yes. Chapter 9:11. Character determined fate and experience determined height. Growing up in human society at a young age gave Sal a broad vision that many of his predecessors and even several chiefs in the past did not have. This was determined by his upbringing. To Duque's surprise, Sal suppressed the doubts of Dorjan and Kain. He not only agreed to the Alliance's first retreat from the River of Fury, but also generously allowed the Alliance to choose an open space anywhere in the lower reaches of the River of Fury in Duroder. Sal stood up. I can't say that I know the Alliance very well, but I know that human cement is a magical thing. It can build a strong fortress group in a very short time. If the Alliance feels that with more time they can build a stronger line of defense, then the tribe does not mind defending the first battle at the foot of Mount Hyjal. There was a slight uproar in the hall. To be honest, there was no conclusion as to who would be at the front. Except for a certain transmigrator, no one knew what the composition of the Burning Legion's forces was. It might not be a bad thing to be at the front because there might be room for retreat. But it might not be a good thing to be at the back because as the mountain road narrowed, retreat would become more and more difficult. If the Night Elves insisted that they had not settled the matter and asked them to continue to fight, would they continue to fight or not? But it was obvious that a wider position would be more conducive to the Alliance's deployment of cannons. Duque was indeed interested in the line of defense on the mountainside. After all, the current situation was very different from the original history. The original alliance only had Janus Theramore army participating in the Battle of the Seamounts, so the number of troops was naturally pitiful. Now, because Duque had saved half of Lordaeron, almost the entire alliance was participating in the war. In addition, the Gnome's main city, Gnome Reagan, which should have happened at this time in history, broke out more than a decade earlier. This time, there was no emergency transfer of the Gnome's mechanized troops to save the situation. Therefore, the alliance's troops were more abundant and larger. The Night Elves would certainly take the position at the top of the mountain, and the remaining two options were the mountainside and the foot of the mountain. But the alliance needed the mountainside, and the tribe's cooperation was needed. Now that Sal took the initiative to propose it, he had really solved a big problem for Duque. After a slight pause, Duque nodded. "Thank you, tribe, for your understanding. In exchange, the alliance will not only provide a large number of excellent holy light weapons to the tribe, but will also provide 500 priests to assist the tribe. Also, provide 2,000 rangers to cover the retreat of the horde." Sal's eyes were half-lidded. Duque was very generous. Although Orgrim had warned Thrall more than once to be careful of Duque, Duque's performance had convinced Thrall. After getting the Night Elves permission to cut down some of the trees in Fellwood Forest for temporary construction, Sal asked the last question. "All right. As for the Night Elves, the tribe only has one last question." "Go ahead." Tyrande lifted her head slightly. "Whether it's the Alliance or the Horde, we're all prepared to make a huge sacrifice for this battle. I just want to know if the move that the Night Elves prepared is worth it. I don't need a specific strategy or a name. I just want you to look me in the eye and answer my question." Magic and whatnot were too profound for the Beastmen. The Orcs, who weren't native to Azeroth, didn't want to know what the Night Elves had done in the past 10,000 years to uphold their oath. They only trusted their own instincts. Tyrande stared at Thrall and replied in an extremely sacred tone, "It's worth it. And when that time comes, even if the Night Elves are completely wiped out, we will definitely fulfill our oath." Thrall let out a long sigh. "I have no more questions." At this moment, he looked at Duque. "What about the Alliance?" Duque sighed softly. "No one knows how strong Archimonde is. But I'm sure that he's at least a demigod. Those who haven't stepped into the realm of heroes can't even hurt a hair on his head. So I suggest that even if the defense line is breached, the Alliance and Horde must find a way to gather at the top of Mount Hyjal." Thrall narrowed his eyes. "Like last time near the Dalagen?" "Yes." Thrall was silent for a moment, then his eyes suddenly widened. "To be honest, our tribe has never forgiven you at all, Duke Marcus." "Oh." Duque was a little lazy. "When has the Alliance ever been willing to sincerely forgive the Beastmen who once massacred cities in the Alliance?" Thrall didn't care about Duque's words at all. He continued, "But for the sake of this world, we choose to believe in the Alliance even if temporarily. I hope that before we defeat the Burning Legion we can work together happily." Thrall strode forward and extended his hand to Duque. Typical Alliance etiquette. Duque let out a murky breath. This feeling was very strange. Two races, two great forces. There was a deep hatred between them, but at this time, they could feel each other's sincerity and chose to trust each other completely. Perhaps this was fate, an ill-fated relationship. Duque smiled. "Please be gentle when you shake hands. I'm just a weak mage. If you use too much force, I'll report you for attacking the Alliance's commander." Duque's words made Thrall laugh. He replied in a rough voice, "I'll be careful, like I'm dealing with your human porcelain." This was a moment of great historical significance. Duque and Thrall's handshake symbolized the first temporary reconciliation between the Alliance and the Horde in the world of Azeroth. In the face of a greater crisis, they had abandoned their differences and enmity to work together sincerely for the first time. Tyrande walked up silently and placed her delicate hand on their interlocked fingers. "For the future of Azeroth," the three of them shouted in unison. A huge war machine that spanned across 8 races started to move at this moment. A few hours later, a spectacular scene appeared in Grey Valley. Tens of thousands of Alliance and Horde troops were marching along the same path. They were once mortal enemies, but now, even though they were less than 5 meters away from each other, they were staring at each other and none of them made a move. There was no ridicule, no mockery, no humiliation, and no killing. Everyone was heading towards the same goal, the same destination. Standing high up on the hill, Sylvanas looked at the long snake of troops in the distance. He couldn't help but feel emotional. "I can't believe they're really going to ally with the Horde. I always find it ironic." Duque turned his head. "Ironic? I advise you to get used to it. In the future, the Alliance and the Horde might fight endlessly, or it might be a united front against a foreign enemy. This is the general trend. Chapter 9:12. Is this the general trend? Queen Sylvanas repeated, deep in thought. The general trend. Since ancient times, how many people had been clear-headed and rational enough to see the general trend? Countless idiots in high positions who thought that the world revolved around them could not see the general trend, causing him, his people, and even his entire race to pay the most terrible price. She knew of Duque's hard work. How many sleepless nights had Duque spent convincing the leaders of the various countries to temporarily set aside their hatred towards the Horde? How many easy gains had Duque given up on to connect the resources of the various factions and make use of the advantages of each faction? Duque used his not-so-broad shoulders to shoulder the future of half of planet Azeroth. Perhaps he had all sorts of bad habits, but as a person and as the leader of an alliance, Duque had done the best he could. Let's go. Since the Night Elves and the Horde have agreed to our request, we don't need to make battle plans anymore. Let's go check on the soldiers. Yes. Queen Sylvanas and Jaina, who were beside Duque, nodded at the same time. On the beach of Azeroth, huge towers rose from the ground. Those were temporary mage towers. Of course, they couldn't compare to the original mage towers, but as a pure mana amplification, it was already very impressive. A little further away from the mage tower was a modular bunker. These bunkers were all the same size, about 20 square meters in size. A few days ago they were just steel frames. After being transported here from the Iron Furnace Castle, they were quickly poured with cement that had been mixed on the spot. The human engineers were using shovels to cover up the bunkers that were starting to take shape. Inside the bunkers, there would be a dwarven cannon or a few crossbowmen using exorcism arrows blessed by the holy light. With the bunkers as cover, the center of Azeroth was filled with well-organized artillery positions. If there was enough time, Duque was even willing to build an east-west railway in Azeroth. Unfortunately, this was a position that was destined to be abandoned, so what the human engineers and dwarves were busy with was a huge asphalt road that could allow 8 carriages to pass side by side. How long until everything is ready? Duque asked Lang Bronzebeard, who was in charge of defense. The dwarf prince, whose lifelong goal was adventure, had big dark bags under his eyes. We can fight at any time, but the longer we fight, the higher the chance of survival for our brothers. They are all good men of the Alliance. Duque was filled with emotion as he looked at the soldiers in the distance who were skillfully preparing for battle. He didn't know whether it was right or wrong to pull the Alliance elites who didn't need to come here. These soldiers were not ordinary rookies. Most of them were veterans who had participated in the first and second battles of the Door of Darkness. When they joined the army, the youngest among them was a young soldier of 14 or 15 years old, while the oldest was only a young soldier of 18 or 19. They came from various countries and most of them had experienced the cruelest battle to defend the capital. At the very least, they had participated in 2 major battles with more than 200,000 people. In the wilderness, in the depths of forests, in swamps, they had built bonfires, set up camps, endured mosquito bites, and gnawed on stinky jerky and wheat cakes. Then they risked their lives to fight against enemies that were far larger than them. Orcs, trolls, ogres, and even goblins who were several stories tall. They had never been afraid. They repeated themselves in the baptism of war day by day, and little by little, they turned from ignorant rookies into elite veterans who dominated the major battlefields. Only this way could they be awarded the rank of sergeant after the second battle of the Door of Darkness. But this was just the beginning. Then, for the arrival of this day, they were arranged to go to various areas where demons ran rampant, and constantly sharpened their skills and tactics through the bloodiest battles. They fought satyrs, fought void trolls, and were even organized to face the hellfire, summoned by human warlocks. 15 years passed in the blink of an eye. After such a long time, most of them were middle-aged and the youngest was nearly 30 years old. They had their own families and children. Many kingdoms could not afford to support so many full-time soldiers, so they would choose to let these people retire and send them back to being farmers. But with Duke's order, these elite warriors who had long passed the peak of their physical strength were left in the Dark Portal's guards. Just for this day. Because they had the best martial arts and the most mature hearts. They would not lose their courage in an instant just because they saw a huge and terrifying demon, and become trash that could be slaughtered by the demon. Duque said in a deep voice, "Gather the soldiers. I have something to say." Half an hour later, in addition to the garrison troops, 50,000 soldiers arrived from a vast position that was more than 10 kilometers long from the north to the south, forming 5 huge phalanxes. Duque led the generals, kings, of the alliance as well as the senior and junior generals, to the high platform, looked at the whole army and took a deep breath. The weather was getting colder and the slightly cold wind blew on their faces, making their noses hurt. But Duque could feel the soldiers' hearts were burning, and their burning gazes said it all. Duque raised his hand, hit his chest and gave a military salute. Every general below followed suit and saluted. What followed the military salute of the generals was the uniform sound of metal clanging against each other. On the high platform, Duque took a step forward and looked at the elites of the alliance in front of him. More than 30% of the low-grade professionals were armed with all kinds of black technology, and they were a real army of tigers and wolves. From their eyes, Duque saw vitality, pride and rising fighting spirit. There was no draft paper and there was no need for draft paper. 15 years of being a commander had trained Duque's unnatural ability to speak without a script. Standing in front of a silver magic microphone, Duque's voice spread throughout the army. Everyone, why have we gathered on this strange land today to prepare for battle? This is not our land, not our family, not the land where our people live and multiply. Why should we fight to the death for it? After a pause, Duque answered his own question. Let me tell you, this is for the survival of the world. This is not a joke. It is not something that is too far away from us. Because we are about to face the largest demon army in the history of this world, the Burning Legion. Once Archimond, the commander of the Burning Legion, takes the power of the World Tree on Mount Hyjal behind us, all life in the world will be polluted and destroyed. At this point there was a low commotion in the 5 huge phalanxes, but it quickly subsided. Chapter 9:13. Once that happens, no one in the world of Azeroth will be able to escape death. What? There will no longer be living fish in the sea, rivers and lakes. There will only be countless rotting corpses. The crops in the fields will no longer grow and turn into man-eating monsters. The water in the deep wells will turn into green poison. You, your family, your people, who will be able to continue living? No one. Not a single one. We will all die. When that time comes, the entire world will perish. You and your family will become rotting and dirty corpses. You will meet your end amidst the evil laughter of the demons. Tell me, do you want such a future? As Duque's impassioned voice fell, an earth-shattering roar came from below. No. We don't want it. Duque waved his fist. That's right. We don't want it. We want to continue living. We want peace for our descendants. We want to multiply. So, what are we going to say to the damn demons with our swords and cannons? Get lost. Go to hell. Demons. Go back to where you came from. It was a messy answer, but it was more real. The 50,000-strong army was like 5 huge boiling pots. They responded to Duque's words with a loud and enthusiastic voice. Duque looked at the roaring expressions on the faces of the soldiers who were no longer young. He was satisfied. He was really satisfied. It was absolutely necessary to have a morale-boosting rally. Knowing what they were fighting for and who their enemies were would make the soldiers more courageous and determined to fight. Duque let the soldiers shout for almost 30 seconds. The next second, he pressed his hands in the air and made a mute gesture. It was as if an invisible giant magic hand had isolated the air and stopped the sound from spreading. Every big shot and general of the Alliance was surprised to find that the soldiers who were shouting just a second ago had all quietened down. All the voices stopped abruptly. They were not inanimate objects. They were not the zombies used as cannon fodder by the Calamity Army. They were the most elite troops of the Alliance. They were proud soldiers who had experienced countless battles. If it had been any other general with lower contributions, they wouldn't have been able to suppress them. However, in front of Duque they were very disciplined. When Duque wanted to speak, he was as docile as a sheep. That's right. This was Duque. He was the #1 hero of the Eastern Kingdom Alliance, who had led the entire Eastern Kingdom Alliance to victory in war after war, and saved the humans, high elves, dwarves, and pygmies from extinction. Looking at Duque's face, people naturally thought of the Great Retreat after the fall of Stormwind City, the Battle of the Southern Sea, the Battle of Paladin Bay, the Battle of Lordaeron City, the Great Battle of Black Rock Mountain, and the latest Dalajan Coalition War and other glorious victories. Only Duke Marcus had such an exaggerated and unsurpassable prestige to suppress these arrogant soldiers and generals, making them feel proud of themselves and obey his orders. In front of Duque's halo of victory, even the Sin Dorii crown worn by Queen Shirley and the Kurtira's crown on Jaina's head paled in comparison. However, this wasn't important. The two queens locked their burning gazes firmly on Duque's stalwart back, their eyes blurred. Duque spoke again. Yes. Everyone is right. Planet Azeroth is our home, our homeland. Whoever wants to trample on it will have to step over our dead bodies first. That's right. Maybe we will all die. Maybe even our corpses will be desecrated by the evil Calamity army. We might even have our souls imprisoned and helplessly become evil accomplices. However again. Like, what? Duque's voice suddenly rose by an octave and he waved his hand. We have fought with our own will. With all our strength. Even at the end of the world, facing our ancestors, we can proudly announce that we have a clear conscience. So, for the future of our descendants, go and fight. Go and roar. With our lives and souls, let's give our strongest voice to the damned demons. Duque raised his right fist with all his strength and pointed it at the sky. Long live the future. Long live Azeroth. Thousands of arms were raised high. It was a forest of swords. It was a mountainous sea of hammers. It was the unyielding will of billions of Azeroth creatures. They completely vented the heat in their chests, letting the thousands of voices converge into one. Long live the future. Long live Azeroth. Duque waved his hand. In the name of the Alliance Commander, I announce that the Mount Hyjal operation has officially begun. Everyone get into position. Let's go. The square formation that was extremely neat a moment ago began to quickly disperse in an orderly manner. Under the command of the middle and high-level generals, the soldiers ran to their respective positions. The once silent beachhead erupted again. Even though they were several kilometers away, they could still feel the murderous aura from above. Turayan and Bulang came before Duque and saluted to Duque. Commander, do you have any other orders? Turayan asked. Duque looked at the undulating beach and sighed softly. Crossing the endless sea to send an army of 100,000 plus heavy equipment was already the limit of what the Alliance could do. It would be great if they could bring the main force of the Alliance here. Unfortunately, there were not so many ifs in the world. Duque said, soldiers without the will to fight can't face a terrifying existence that is several times stronger than them. But if the will to fight is too strong, it will only cause the good men of the Alliance to die here in vain. Tell the brats below that this is only the first battle. I don't need them all to die here. Follow the rules and retreat when it's time. I have prepared a magic array near Orgrimmar to send the troops in their best condition to the mountainside of Mount Hyjal. Turayan punched his chest with one hand. His gauntlet hit his breastplate with a crisp clang. Understood. Then Turayan and Bulang went down. Just as they were about to walk down the high platform, Duque's voice floated over. Remember to get out of Mount Hyjal alive, and then find a way to get out alive. Turayan and Bulang looked at each other and smiled. Boss, you're so demanding. Of course, if we're going to fight with our lives on the line, Mograine will be the commander here. Waving his hand, Turayan's elegant figure before he left was imprinted in Duque's eyes. Mograine patted Duque's back a little grumpily. Damn it, you make it sound like I'm an idiot who only knows how to fight with my life on the line. Duque didn't reply. He looked at Turayan and then at Mograine. Duque was deep in thought. Fate had changed. Chapter 9:14. Looking back, many people who should have died in battle were unknowingly saved by Duque. Without Duque, Turalyon would have counterattacked Draenor after the second dark portal and disappeared with the big explosion. 9 out of 10 he was dead. If Kalia was not hidden, then Kalia, who had completely lost hope in life, would have chosen to live in seclusion after the fall of Rotterdam. The scattered people of Rotterdam would have fought for themselves and composed a sad and touching death war song. The crazy Scarlet Crusade would have been born. Saidan Dathrahan's body would have been taken by the Dreadlord and harmed everywhere. Abendis would have died tragically in Hearth Valley. Alexandros Mograine would have been even more tragic. He would have been killed by his own son Reynold. Bewitched by the Dreadlord who pretended to be Saidan Dathrahan, Reynold deceived his father and let old Mograine fall into the trap of the Scourge army. Reynold picked up the Ashbringer and killed his biological father. Although old Mograine was responsible for Reynold's downfall, patricide had always been one of the deepest sorrows since ancient times. There was also Queen Sylvie. At this point in history she was already a banshee of death. She was bound by Arthas like a dog. Instead of having bright skin and a hearty and proud expression, she could still be alive and kicking by his side. Thinking that this might be the end of the world, Duque let out a long sigh and secretly swore in his heart. Damn it, Archimonde, you must die. Duke's inadvertent expression of great pressure was seen by the two queens at the same time. Jaina's eyes turned. Just as she was thinking of something, she caught a glimpse of the fireworks pinned to her chest armor. Yes. It was a small white fireworks used for funerals. She deliberately pinned it there to remind her of the vengeance of her father and brother. Jaina pursed her lips. When Sylvanas caught up with Duque, Jaina was still half a step too slow. But she did not regret it. At this moment, Mount Hyjal had become a huge pre-war construction site. At the foot of the mountain, the elves who were watching felt their hearts aching as they watched the crude orc laborers chopping down the 100-year-old trees with great effort. They used the thick trunks of the trees as the pillars of the huge blockhouses, and sharpened the smaller branches and inserted them into the ground, facing the foot of the mountain, to serve as antlers. One after another, archer towers in the style of orcs rose from the ground. Tall and slender trolls nimbly climbed up the towers. They took a large piece of metal from the goblins and stuffed it outside the arrow tower to act as a shield for themselves. Then they arranged the javelins provided by the humans in a position that was convenient for them to reach. The spearhead, which was made of fine steel, shone brightly in the dusk. At the mountain pass, the wide ground on both sides was surrounded by wooden stakes and thick ropes. There were signs in all kinds of languages stuck on them, and there were even pictures of goblins scribbled on them. Holding his beloved axe, Bloodhowl, Grum muttered, "Thrall, I don't trust those dwarves at all. Although their skin is also green, look, since noon, those idiots have already blown up more than a dozen of their own people." Thrall patted the shoulder of this senior who had narrowly escaped death. "Grum. First, it wasn't the orcs, trolls, or taurens who died. Second, they aren't even afraid of death, so why should we worry for them?" Before Sal could finish speaking, there was a loud boom sound. At least half a dozen goblins were blown into the sky and then disintegrated into green and red parts, scattering evenly on the ground within a radius of 100 meters. Then the nearby goblins all gaped as they watched their companions succeed in courting death as if they were watching fireworks. Some even whistled. There was no need for the orcs to criticize them. A goblin sitting on a thick metal robot that was as tall as 3 people picked up the metal loudspeaker and cursed. His sharp and unpleasant voice could be heard within a radius of hundreds of meters. "Frank, I told you. Don't let those idiots go to where we buried the mines. And, I repeat, don't eat a cigar when burying the mines." The goblins below looked at their boss with puzzled and amused expressions. The goblin flipped out. "Bastard. Who dares to not listen to me? Half of your wages will be deducted." This time, the goblins below all seemed to have been ruthlessly whipped. They all obeyed as if they were facing a great enemy. On the other side, Grum slapped his forehead. His expression was clearly telling Thrall, "Look." Thrall couldn't help but bare his teeth. But then he changed the topic. "But, if this world has a future, I will consider recruiting goblins into the tribe." Even someone as bold as Grum couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice. Thrall took out 2 axes from the box beside him. One was an incomparably crude stone axe made from sharp stones and thick branches. The other was a steel axe that emitted a cold light. It was obvious that it was a killing weapon. "One is what we can make now, and the other is what the humans just gave us. You know what I'm trying to say." Grum was silent. He was most aware of the backwardness of the orcs in the field of forging and metallurgy. In the 10 years of living in the forest of Tirisfal, an axe forged by the dark iron dwarves, even if it had been chipped countless times, was still a treasure in the eyes of the orc soldiers. The most exaggerated thing was that this axe had changed owners for a total of 15 times, and it had never been eliminated. Compared to the stone axes and hammers that were easily broken by humans, the sturdy dwarven products were, of course, more trustworthy. In the end, wasn't this the backwardness of technology? The backwardness of civilization? Backwardness meant being beaten. This was inevitable. Wajin came up and dispelled Grom's last hope with one sentence. "The trolls have spent 8,000 years to prove that using flesh and blood to fight against a higher civilization would lead to a tragic end. The Lordaeron continent that you ravaged 14 years ago, the capitals of the human kingdoms that you destroyed, were all once the territory of the Amani Troll Empire." Grum no longer raised any objections. Thrall set the tone for this matter. "We'll talk about those things later. Right now, the Burning Legion is our real enemy. We are not fighting for the Alliance at this moment, but for the survival of the tribe. Since Duke Marcus has treated us with sincerity, we must return the favor of a warrior." "Understood." Several tribal leaders answered in unison. However, looking at the noisy goblins, Thrall was thoughtful. Late at night, the tribes at the foot of the mountain and the Alliance on the mountainside were still preparing for war all night under the lights. Duque suddenly received an urgent call from Sylvanas. "Second sister is in a hurry. Come quickly. Lilith nervously informed Duque, who knew as soon as he entered Queen Sylvia's tent, Duque's knee was hit by an arrow. Chapter 9:15. When Duque lifted the curtain of the tent and went in, he was shocked by the darkness inside, and then he was shot. The moment he was hit by the arrow, Duque recalled a famous saying that had spread far and wide. I used to be a dragon-slaying hero until I got shot in the knee. Well, those were all unimportant things. The point was, Duque did not understand why Queen Mao Shi shot him with an arrow. Before entering the tent, the system elf helped him scan it, and there was only Queen Mao Shi in the tent. What the hell? Or did I make a big mistake? Queen Mao Shi finally couldn't stand me having a harem and wanted to murder her husband? Is this the legendary tragic ending of killing her husband with a hatchet? Full of questions, along with the rapid spread of numbness from his knee, almost drove Duque crazy. The strong numbness almost made Duque fall on the ground. The next second, Duque suddenly found himself buried in a pair of elastic Mount Hygel. This is, Duque heard Queen Mao Shi's voice. Sorry, I used a strong anesthetic on the arrow. But it doesn't matter, it won't cause any harm to your body. For some reason, Duque suddenly remembered. According to history, after Nazul's control weakened, Queen Shi, who had become a death banshee, relied on an arrow coated with a powerful poison to shoot Arthas. Arthas was almost completely killed. Damn it. How could I forget that Sister Mao Shi is a master of poison? By the way, what did I do wrong? She actually wants to use the arrow, which is worth at least 1,000 gold coins, to kill me? Duque felt like he was in a trance. He wanted to curse, but the feeling of having his face pinched by the Mount Hygel was great. No. Now was not the time to worry about this. What did Queen Mao Shi want to do? Duque wanted to open his mouth, but he found that his whole body was numb, and he could not even speak. Don't worry, how could I hurt you? If big sister and third sister come back, they will skin me alive. Queen Sylvie laughed as she dragged Duque to the bed like a dead dog. Surrounded by darkness, his hands and feet were numb. Through the system elf scan, Duque found that Queen Sylvie had taken off his magician robe and was tying him to the bed. It was as if she was dissecting a frog from his biology class. A cold light shone in the darkness. Duque's scalp went numb. He could recognize it even if he turned to ash. That was the ultimate weapon that countless Azeroth players had used before he traveled to this world. It was the weapon that had skinned billions of ferocious monsters. Even the behemoth and the dragon race were not spared. It was the ultimate weapon that the players would not change even if they changed their weapons countless times. Skinning knife. In Duque's mind, the scene of him being skinned and dying tragically appeared. Not good. Guards. Protect the Emperor. Some unruly people want to harm me. With a flash of a knife, Queen Sylvie skillfully used the skinning knife to help Duque cast Armor Break. Then the candlelight lit up. In the flickering candlelight, Duque saw Sylvanas, who was wearing the Queen's crown but only the Robe of Insight. The Robe of Insight was known to be on the same level as a virgin killer who wore a sweater. Duque's nose was about to bleed. At this moment, Duque just wanted to say, "You, a ranger, hunter, actually snatched the cloth armor. You're breaking the rules." Well, the dignified Queen of Sindorii was dressed like this to feast his eyes. Duque suddenly felt a sense of vagueness that he could die without regrets. Queen Sylvie tilted her head, her face red. Originally, I didn't want to start this hunting ritual. I always thought that you were my prey and no one could take you away. Speaking of this, Sylvanas sighed. Who would have thought that an Archimond would come out? Well, I can only let you have it. Queen Sylvie sat condescendingly, her slender fingers stretched out and tapped on Duque's chest, showing a beautiful arc. She made an extremely domineering declaration. I declare in the name of the Queen of Sindorii, Sylvanas Windrunner, you, Duke Marcus, will be my prey for the rest of your life. You're mine. Without my permission no one can take you away. Until the end of the world. With that, she gently dripped a drop of anti-paralysis potion into Duque's mouth. Queen Sylvie leaned down and used her fiery red lips to enjoy her prey. In the face of bullying and oppression, Duque's godly sword rose up to resist. It stubbornly faced the attack, trying to pierce through the devouring darkness. Finally, the sword light shot out, scaring the cruel queen so much that her face turned pale. Queen Sylvie's more miscalculation was yet to come. She didn't know that Duque didn't necessarily need his muscles to control his body's movements. He could use his magic circuit to control his body. Duque launched a great counterattack. He attacked. Duque's godly sword shocked the world. One sword light froze 19 continents. Duque told Queen Sylvie with hard facts. Those who play with fire will burn themselves, and those who play with swords will be hurt by swords. I don't care if you're a high and mighty queen. You're also my Aurelia's sister. Kill without mercy. With one slash, blood splattered everywhere. The queen, who was hit by the sword, was like a swan shot by an arrow. She raised her neck high and let out a scream. Duque. You bastard, Servanas cursed. Come on. Let's fight. Duque was full of fighting spirit. Berserker Duke activated godly sword lunged 999 times. He directly sent Queen Sylvie to heaven. At dawn, Queen Sylvie hugged Duque tightly, tears still hanging on her long and straight eyelashes. The two woke up almost at the same time. Their eyes met. There was an indescribable deep affection and uncountable bitterness. If the scout ship's report was correct, the first battle of Mount Hyjal would begin this morning. There was not much time. Sigh. The two sighed softly at the same time and fell silent at the same time. Without a word, Duque got up. She was clearly a noble queen, but Servanas was like a gentle and virtuous peasant woman serving her husband, personally helping Duque put on his shirt and other clothes. Duque noticed that this brand new shirt had clumsy workmanship that could be said to be an insult to the elven costume designer, but the shirt was extremely fitting. Duque revealed a gentle smile. Thank you. Servanas' eyes were suddenly filled with tears. Don't you dare damage this shirt. Right. If the shirt wasn't damaged, he would naturally be fine. The smile on Duque's face grew wider, and he raised a wooden scepter that looked like a drumstick in his hand. A mere Archaron can't do anything to me. I'm the man who will take Atish, the legendary scepter of the Guardian, in the future. Unknowingly, Servanas' eyes became infatuated. Chapter 9:16. Hearing that the descending super-demon was Archimonde, one of the 3 leaders of the Burning Legion, after witnessing the terrifying power that could destroy the world, many cowards were so scared that their legs trembled, and some even peed their pants. Even the bravest warriors crossed the sea and came to this foreign land with the idea of fighting to the death. There was only Duque, and there was only one Duque in the world. He had the ability and courage to say such a sentence. A mere Archimonde can't do anything to me. Suddenly, Servanas smiled. Her smile was as bright as a spring breeze. There was no other reason. She suddenly felt that only this man in front of her, who looked down on all the heroes in the world and viewed billions of demons as ants, was the great hero in her heart who was worthy of being entrusted to her for thousands of years until eternity. Queen Sylvanas had the urge to hug Duque from behind. She gave up. If that was the case, then what was the difference between her and those weak women who could only watch their men go to the battlefield and could only hope for a child before the battle, and were afraid that the child would be a posthumous child? She was Servanas, the queen of the kingdom of Sindorii, the Valkyrie on the battlefield. If there was still a glimmer of hope in this world, then this glimmer of hope must have been fought for by her and Duque. So in just 2 or 3 minutes, she was already standing beside Duque in her military uniform. Duque seemed to want to say something but stopped. Servanas glared at him and made a seemingly ferocious expression. He fiercely spat at Duque and said while gnashing his teeth, "All right, it's my mistake. I'll look for Riadeline to treat her later." Duque rubbed his eyebrows. Most of the Alliance had a policy of taking a holiday before a battle, but the night before the battle seemed to be a little bad. Sigh. Duque looked into the distance, which was the east of Azhara's beachhead. As the last unmanned boat anchored offshore and used for detection tilted and sank, Turalian finally gave the order, "Ready." At first it was just a few inconspicuous bubbles, but soon the sea seemed to be boiling and there were bubbles everywhere. In the end, it was even connected into a continuous gurgling sound. The first ugly head floated to the surface. In the command post, Turalian could clearly see the monster through his binoculars. Mermaid? He was indeed a merman. Turalian was no stranger to the Murlocs. Even today there were more than 30,000 Murlocs in the Alliance. They belonged to the Murloc prophet Magar and reported directly to the king of Stormwind, Varian. In fact, everyone knew that for some reason, the mixed legion of Murlocs and Naga had always been loyal to Duque. It was not important. The Murloc in his field of vision was even larger. It didn't look like a fishman at all. It looked more like an adult hippopotamus. It wasn't just one but thousands upon thousands of fishmen that floated to the surface of the water. They all looked the same. Their teeth that were even sharper and more sinister, as well as their scarlet eyes that exuded an ominous aura, were all telling Turalian that there was something wrong with this vanguard of the Burning Legion. Soon the Alliance soldiers saw a male Naga that was one size larger. These deep-sea monsters with the same pair of scarlet eyes drove the merfolk towards the shore. In just a few minutes they had slowly come ashore from the shallows. They were less than 50 meters away from the most front line of the beachhead blockhouse. Fire arrows. Turalian's order was quickly transmitted to the position below through the most primitive loudspeaker. The enemy was the Burning Legion, and no one knew if the magic transmission would fail. The communication method that was so useful in the last battle at the Dark Portal could only be used as a support here. The most primitive communication method was more secure. A narrow fire dragon ignited at the back of the bunkers. The High Elven Rangers had already raised their longbows, and there were burning arrows on their bows. As the red flag on the towering arrow tower waved down, the silent signal made the bowstrings vibrate in unison. The next moment, most of the soldiers on the beachhead saw a fiery red line flying into the sky. The number of this batch of arrows was so small that it couldn't even be called an arrow rain at all. Naturally, the fire arrows caused almost no direct damage, but the expression on Turalian's face did not change at all as he watched the battle from afar. He was waiting for the follow-up effect, and he would see it soon. The fire arrows ignited as soon as they touched the seawater. Of course, the seawater would not burn. What was ignited was the oil that had been dumped into the sea early in the morning. For this battle, the Alliance spent a lot of money to buy more than a dozen ships of crude oil from the goblins who wanted money even in the end of the world. Oil would float on the sea, and if it was before Dubois transmigrated, this would undoubtedly be an ecological disaster. Now, once the oil was ignited, it would immediately form thick smoke. And because of the unique geographical environment of Azhara, there was a strong wind blowing from the west to the east. All of a sudden, as long as the Murlocs and Nagas dared to come out of the water, they would all be hit. They would either be wrapped in flames, or choked by the thick smoke and could not open their eyes. For marine creatures, being burned by fire was definitely a very rare thing. If these Murlocs were still ordinary Murlocs, they would definitely be scared and run around the beach, letting out miserable and annoying screams. But it was as if they could not feel the flames roasting their flesh and scales. Instead, like madmen, they were like fireballs that could run away, directly charging towards the beachhead blockhouses. Fortunately, they did not have such tenacious vitality. Most of them rushed 20 meters before falling on the beach with strange cries, becoming twitching corpses in the flames. But this scene made Turalian, who was watching the battlefield from afar, frown uncontrollably. At the end of the day, the Murlocs were just cannon fodder. This almost made him activate the next batch of traps. If there were stronger ones, then wouldn't the Burning Legion have some tricks up their sleeves? Soon the first wave of probing attacks ended. After thousands of corpses were left on the beach, no more Murlocs rushed to the shore. The sea was still burning. Following the tide, the rolling waves of fire slapped on the reefs or the beach. Turalian noticed that the sea was still boiling. It had nothing to do with the ignited oil. It was a large number of Murlocs hidden under the water surface blowing bubbles. Immediately, a huge figure rose from the sea, causing the hearts of every Alliance soldier to jump. They were generally more than 6 meters tall, with a slightly horizontal and burly body. Their green skin glistened in the flames, and the huge iron anchors in their hands that were more than 3 meters long were even more shocking. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.